Hi guys, this is Macro Man again. This is part 2 of our VBA beginner series, and we're going to be looking at range and cells. With all of these VBA beginner series videos, the ideal thing to do is to open Excel on your laptop or desktop PC and follow along with me while we're doing these videos, and that will be optimal for your learning. At the end of the video, I'll set you a small task just to make sure that you've learned everything that we've discussed in this video, and if you can just sort of absorb these videos one at a time, do the small tasks before you move on to the next one, that'll be optimal and it will be able to help you to learn much quicker. Okay, so let's jump into it. If you can recall, last time we created our first macro called my first macro, simply a message box that says hello world, and we created a button to click and it just shows us the hello world message box. But today we're going to be using the range function. Now, what is range? Range, whenever you click on a cell, you can see up here it says A1. That's what's known as the range of the cell. So we could either use click on individual cells, so this would be H3, P23, etc, etc, and if we click and hold and expand it to a whole bunch of cells like this, effectively you could say the range of these cells is A1 to D11. So a range could either be one cell or a whole group of cells like this. So let's use the range object to enter some data. Just another quick, before we get into this, just to familiarize yourself more with the Visual Basic Editor. Again, this is our project window. As you can see, here's our module 1 that we created in the last lesson, and we've got sheet 1 and title in brackets. What that means is, if you look down at the bottom here, we've got title, my first macro, range, learning task. So the part inside the brackets is the actual name of the sheet that the user can see. Then this sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 and sheet 4 to the left of those is the actual name of the sheet that will be recognized by the VBA, and I'll explain why that's important in a minute. So if we go into our module 1, if we enter a new line below the end sub, we're going to create a new macro. With modules, you can put as many or as few macros in there as you like. You can have 1 to 1,000 macros in a module, although I wouldn't recommend that. Or you can create several. You could create a separate module for each single macro. I tend to group macros together depending on what function they have, and we'll cover those in later videos. So just for now, we're going to create a new macro below this one that we created last time. So let's do sub, and let's call this range. So type the sub and then range and then press enter. That'll add the open and close brackets and the end sub at the end. So let's expand this a little bit. So what we want to do, we want to type something into this range A1. So to do that, there's two ways you can refer to a range using the sheets method. You can write sheets, open bracket, speech marks, and then the actual name of the sheet. So in this case it's range, and then you click dot range, and let's say A1, and let's say it's equal to 1. So if we click at the top here and click the play button, as you can see, 1 has now been entered into cell A1 or range A1. As discussed in the last video, if you just wanted to step through this line by line, you press F8. That will turn the line yellow. This is called debugging mode, and to execute one line at a time, you just click F8 and it goes down to the next executable line. So if I took that out for a second, when it's over the line like this, that means the line hasn't yet been executed. To execute the line, just press F8 and it runs that piece of code and it will appear in there. So end the sub. So let's cheat and copy this, say 3 times just for the purposes of demo. And let's say we wanted to put, say, 1, 2 and 3 into cells or range A1, A2 and A3. So if we go down to this next line and say this is A2 and this is A3, and let's say this is 2 and this is 3. So let's delete that for a second. Okay, so when we click the play button, we should essentially see, well, let's just step through it. So if we press F8, range will go yellow, and let's execute the next line by pressing F8, F8, and as you can see it's gone to 1, F8, A2 has gone to 2, F8 and A3 has gone to 3. So that's excellent, that all works properly. And that's how you enter a value into a range object. Now if you enter in numbers, you don't need to put speech marks because essentially this recognizes this as an integer value. But if you wanted to enter a name, say Steve, Jim, Bob, something like this, let's clear this out. If I tried to execute that, it will say variable not defined, because any string of text that is not enclosed in speech marks, the VBA will recognize that as a variable, which we will cover in another video. But anytime you want any kind of text, you have to open and close with speech marks like this. So if we do that for each of these, so Steve, Jim and Bob, so execute one line at a time, Steve, Jim, Bob, there we go, we can now see they've been entered into range A1 to A3. Okay, also because it gets a little bit annoying having to clear out this every time, what we're going to do is we're going to use the range object to clear the contents of anything we've entered before. So at the moment we're just going to be using column A. So if we just say sheets range, and let's say range A1, or actually we'll just use A to A. That will effectively clear out anything that's in the whole of column A, like that. Dot clear contents. So if you want to re-execute a line rather than having to stop and start again, if you just click and hold on the yellow arrow here next to the highlighted piece of code, you can click and hold and drag it to where you want to execute the line, and then press F8. As you can see, column A has now cleared the previous contents. So click to finish this off, and there we go. There is Steve, Jim and Bob again. Okay, so as I said before, there's 2 ways to refer to the sheet. You've got the sheets, open brackets, speech marks, name of the sheet here like this, and then dot range. But the way that I always use, the way it's much easier to use, is like this. So we're going to create, and let's create another macro. So we just copy and paste that. Let's call this range 2. Now we're working on the range sheet. So if we wanted to refer to this sheet in code, not just by the name, we can do it like this. Let's delete this out. So if we did sheet 4, which is the actual coding name of this sheet rather than range, dot, when I press dot, you'll see this little list appear. This is what's called an Intellisense List, and this will provide all of the list of ranges and options and properties that you can use with this sheet. So if we click sheet 4 and start typing range, as you can see range automatically comes up as one of the methods or properties that we can use. Click tab and that will automatically populate that. And then we can open the bracket again and let's say A1 equals Steve, again, sheet 4 dot, start typing the word range, and it comes up A2 equals Jim, sheet 4 dot range A3 equals Bob. Okay, and as you can recall, we wanted to also clear out the contents first. So if we do sheet 4 dot range, let's say A to A dot. If we press the dot, as you can see, we get the Intellisense list again. So we got, start typing CL for clear contents. You can see clear contents comes up as one of the options. Okay. So there we go, those are the differences. Now why would we use the two differences? Well, one of the main obvious reasons is it's a lot easier just to type the name of the sheet and then the dot to bring up the list of options. But also, a pretty more important reason is if you create a really cool Excel VBA sheet for one of your users and they decide to change the names of one of the tabs, then if you've written it out like this, the macro will fail. So if I say change this to something else, say cheese. If I now try to run this macro, it won't work because it no longer recognizes the word range for the name of the sheet because obviously it's been changed, so that will fail. But this macro, if you refer to the sheet using the code name, it will still work, and you will protect yourself and your users from any inadvertent tampering of the sheet. So that's how you enter values into a range of a sheet. So let's have a look at using cells. So that's the range. Okay, so this is range 1 and range 2. So let's create a new sub cells. Enter. Now, there's two ways you can enter data into a worksheet. You can use the range method or the cells method. And what's the difference between the two? Well, if I just copy this and paste it in here. Right, so let's clear that. So rather than saying range A to A, let's say if you press the sheet, if you do like sheet 4 and press the dot, it will come up with cells. Open it, and then when you open the bracket, you'll get this little tooltip. It says row index or column index. So row index, basically, what row are we wanting to refer to? Actually, it's pretty bad example for the clear contents because you have to use a combination of range and cells, and we'll come back to that later. So let's just use that for now. But with entering individual values, if we type in, say, sheet 4 dot cells, open the brackets, and it asks you for a row index. So basically, what row are you wanting to enter the data into? So in this case, it's row 1. Press a comma, and when you press a comma, it moves over to the column index. So what column are we wanting to enter this data into? Now with Excel, it's fairly straightforward. A is column 1, B is column 2, C is column 3, etc. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this. So want to enter a value into row 1, column 1. Close the bracket, and then we enter Steve. So using this, let's cheat and just copy this. So rather than being A1, A2, and A3, it's like this. So it's row 1, column 1, i.e. A1. Row 2, column 1, so it's row 2 and column A. And row 3, column 1 or column A. So it's Steve, Jim, Bob. Okay, so if we do this, execute line by pressing F8, let's clear out the previous contents. Steve, Jim, and Bob. As you can see, it's now entered in there as well. And let's use the cells method to clear out the contents. Now, when you're clearing out the contents of a column like this, I always find it easy to just use the range method. Just do range A to A like that, but you can also use cells. What you've got to do is say range cells like this, and then we're starting from row 1 column 1, i.e. cell A1, and then do close bracket, then comma, cells, let's say some high arbitrary number, say 1000. So from row 1 to 1000, we're never going to use that many, and then close that out, and then do the clear contents at the end. That's effectively the same as clearing the whole of column A. Why has that not worked? Sheet forward range cells 1 to 1, cells row 1 column 1, cells dot clear contents. What the hell? Why is that not working? Ignore that for now. We'll come back to that later. Right. There we go. So that's the cells method. Okay, so we'll leave it there for now. If we go to the learning task, as you can see, the learning task is to create a macro to enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 using the range function in cells A1 to A6. Create a macro to enter A, B, C, D, E, and F using the cells function in cells B1 to B6. Draw a button on the sheet and assign a macro to it. And number 4, at the beginning of the macro, write some code to remove the contents of any previous data in columns A and B so that the macro effectively refreshes itself every time you run it. Okay, so we'll leave it there, and I'll see you for the next video.